$12 million. That's how much they said my mistake was worth. After 4 decades of saving lives, one decision on one terrible night threatened to strip away everything I'd worked for and leave me labeled as the doctor who let a young mother die. My name is Dr. Thomas Miller, and this is the story of how a single moment of judgment in 2018 almost ended my career, and how the truth isn't always what it seems in a courtroom. You think you know what it's like to make life or death decisions until you're standing in an operating room with someone as blood on your hands and lawyers questioning every choice you made. It was a Friday night in November, one of those Chicago evenings where the cold cuts through your bones. Our Southside ER looked like a war zone, 3 car accidents, a shooting, and the usual parade of emergencies. I'd been pulling double shifts because we were short-staffed again. That's when Amanda Chen walked through our doors at 11:23 p.m. 28 years old, 7 months pregnant, clutching her swollen belly with hands that shook. Her husband David was half carrying her, panic written across his face. "Doctor, please," he said in broken English. "Something wrong with baby. She very pain." Amanda's skin was pale with a grayish tint that experienced ER doctors learned to recognize. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. She wore a simple blue maternity dress now soaked with sweat despite the November chill. "How long has she been in pain?" I asked while guiding them toward a treatment room. 2 hours, maybe 3. Started sudden. She say feels like tearing inside. Amanda collapsed before we could get her on a gurney. Her eyes rolled back, her pulse thready at her wrist. This wasn't labor. This was something much worse. "Get me an ultrasound, call obstetrics and prep or 3, I shouted to Jenny, our head nurse, "and someone get me her chart." Jenny's face told me what I feared. Amanda had no medical records in our system. No prenatal visits, no OB/GYN notes, nothing. She was a ghost in the system, which meant we were flying blind. The ultrasound showed massive internal bleeding and a baby in distress. Placental abruption. The placenta had separated from the uterine wall, killing both mother and child with each passing second. "Where's obstetrics?" "Dr. Rodriguez is stuck in traffic. ETA 20 minutes minimum." 20 minutes. Amanda didn't have 20 minutes. Her blood pressure was 70/40 and falling. The baby's heart rate was becoming erratic. I stared at David's terrified face, then at Amanda's unconscious form, then at the monitor showing a baby's heart rate that was becoming more erratic by the second. In my 37 years of emergency medicine, I'd never faced a choice this stark. Certainly lose 2 lives by following protocol or risk everything to save one. "Dr. Miller," Jenny whispered, "what do you want to do?" David couldn't understand the medical terminology, but he could read the room. "Please," he begged, grabbing my arm. The resident beside me, Dr. Kim, looked terrified. She was barely 2 months into her emergency rotation. "Should we wait for Dr. Rodriguez?" "Look at that monitor," I said, pointing to Amanda's vitals. "She'll be dead in 10 minutes. The baby will follow." This was the moment that would later be called reckless and outside scope of practice, the decision that nearly destroyed my career. "We're going to R3 now, Sarah, scrub in. Jenny, get me O-neg blood and call anesthesia." "But Dr. Miller, you're not..." Dr. Kim started. "I'm not an obstetric surgeon, I know, but right now I'm the only surgeon in this building. We can follow the rules and watch them both die, or break the rules and try to save who we can." The next 27 minutes were the most intense of my career. Amanda's blood pressure dropped to 50/30. We were losing her fast, but the baby still had a chance. The incision had to be perfect. Too shallow and I'd waste time. Too deep and I might hurt the baby. Blood obscured my view despite suction. "There," I said, feeling the baby move. "I can feel him." I lifted the baby clear. Small, premature, but alive. His first cry filled the room. But Amanda was crashing. Despite massive transfusions, her bleeding wouldn't stop. Dr. Rodriguez arrived at 3:22 a.m., but it was too late. Even with the obstetric team's expertise, Amanda Chen died at 3:47 a.m. 6 months later, I was served with papers. David Chen was suing for wrongful death, claiming I had exceeded my scope of practice. $12 million in damages. The lawyers painted me as an arrogant doctor, who couldn't admit his limitations. They brought in expert witnesses who testified that waiting for the specialist was standard of care. They showed the jury photos of baby Daniel growing up without his mother. For 18 months, I lived in hell. The media coverage was brutal. Headlines like, "Veteran ER doctor accused of fatal surgery beyond his training." Colleagues avoided me. Patients requested different doctors. The hospital put me on administrative leave. "Tom, you know I support you," hospital administrator Patricia Webb told me. "But the insurance company is concerned. They're suggesting administrative leave until this is resolved. 40 years of service, and they wanted to bench me because of a lawsuit. I was reduced to treating cuts and sprains, while lawyers dissected every decision I'd made that night. My malpractice insurance wanted to settle, but I refused. I knew I had made the right choice, but doubt crept in during sleepless nights. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe my ego had cost Amanda her life. The legal process dragged on for 18 months. Depositions where lawyers grilled me about every detail, medical board hearings where bureaucrats questioned my competence, expert witnesses who had never worked an ER shift criticized my judgment from their ivory towers. "Maybe we should settle," my wife Margaret said one evening, watching me push food around my plate. "Maybe it's not worth risking everything we've built. If I settle, every emergency physician will hesitate before making a hard decision. People will die because doctors are afraid of lawyers." But privately, the doubt was eating me alive. I started taking sleeping pills just to function. Our conversations became strained. How do you tell your wife of 32 years that you might have killed someone through arrogance? Then, 3 weeks before trial, Dr. Sarah Kim knocked on my office door. She looked exhausted, clutching a manila folder. "Dr. Miller," she whispered, "I found something that changes everything." Sarah had been tormented by what happened that night. She'd been digging through hospital records, searching for any mention of Amanda before that night. Amanda had been in our ER 2 weeks before her death, with severe abdominal pain. Dr. Roberts ordered blood work that showed a severe bleeding disorder, disseminated intravascular coagulation. Amanda never saw the results. They sat in the computer, flagged but never reviewed. The autopsy showed chronic placental abruption, gradual detachment over weeks, not acute separation that night. "She was dying for weeks," Sarah said, crying. "The bleeding disorder, the chronic abruption, nothing could have saved her, but you saved her baby." Morrison, Blake and Associates had known about the bleeding disorder all along. They withheld the earlier ER records and submitted partial pathology reports. Their entire case was built on a lie. When confronted with the complete medical records, their expert witnesses withdrew. The case was dismissed. Morrison was sanctioned and suspended for 18 months. David Chen came to my office when he learned the truth. "Dr. Miller," he said, "I need to apologize. The lawyer told me you killed Amanda. I didn't know she was already sick." He broke down. This man who'd been manipulated into believing I was responsible for his wife's death. "Would you still be Daniel's doctor?" he asked. "Amanda trusted you. I want to trust you too." Today, Daniel Chen is 5 years old. He's healthy, brilliant, and calls me Dr. Tom when David brings him for checkups. He's learning to ride a bike, loves dinosaurs, and has his mother's bright eyes. David and I have become something more than doctor and patient. We're connected by that terrible night and the truth that almost came too late. The lawsuit changed me in ways that had nothing to do with money or reputation. For 18 months, I had lived with the possibility that everything I believed about myself as a doctor was wrong. That my judgment, honed over 4 decades of emergency medicine, had failed when it mattered most. The vindication was sweet, but it came at a cost. I learned that truth doesn't always protect you in our legal system, that lawyers can manipulate evidence, suppress facts, and turn tragedy into profit, that sometimes the people fighting for justice are actually fighting for something else entirely. But I also learned something more important. The price of second-guessing yourself in emergency medicine isn't just personal doubt, it's other people's lives. After the case was dismissed, the hospital offered me full reinstatement, a formal apology, and a commendation for saving Daniel's life. But the damage was done. I started documenting every decision more carefully, ordering additional tests to protect myself legally rather than medically. I found myself hesitating in crisis moments, hearing lawyers' voices instead of my own medical training. That's not the doctor I wanted to be. That's not the doctor my patients deserved. So I retired 2 years earlier than planned. Not because of the lawsuit, but because of what it taught me about fear. Fear of litigation was making me a worse doctor, and I wouldn't let that happen. Now, sitting in my Florida retirement watching the sunset over the golf course, I think about that night more often than I probably should. About Amanda's final moments, about David's grief, about the baby who survived because I acted when protocols said to wait. The irony isn't lost on me. If I had followed standard procedure and waited for the obstetric specialist that night, both Amanda and Daniel would have died. The bleeding disorder that the lawyers tried to hide would have killed them both within minutes. Instead, because I broke the rules, a little boy got to live, a wine dome. Sometimes I wonder what Amanda would think about all of this. Would she have wanted her husband to sue me? Would she have understood that her death was unavoidable, but her son's life was not? Would she have forgiven me for not saving her? I'll never know. But I know this. In 40 years of emergency medicine, I learned that perfect outcomes don't exist. There are only the decisions you make with the information you have, in the time you're given, with the skills you possess. The lawsuit that almost destroyed my career became the case that defined it instead. Not because of the money or the vindication, but because it reminded me that medicine is not about protecting yourself from criticism. It's about protecting your patients from death. When young doctors ask me for advice now, I tell them this: document everything, follow protocols when you can, but never let fear of litigation stop you from saving a life when you are the only one who can do it. Because in the end, that's all we have. Our decisions, our training, and the courage to act when lives hang in the balance. The lawyers can question your judgment later, but the dead can't be brought back to life while you're waiting for permission to save them. The $12 million lawsuit taught me that doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from legal consequences, but it's still the right thing to do. And Daniel Chen, now 5 years old and full of life, is living proof of that. The price of hesitation in emergency medicine is measured in lives lost. The price of action is sometimes measured in lawyers' fees and sleepless nights. But I'd rather face a courtroom than a coffin any day. Because saving one life makes all the rest worth it. Today, when young residents ask me about that night, I tell them about more than just medical decision-making. I tell them about standing up to a system that sometimes values legal protection over patient care. I tell them about the importance of fighting for truth even when it seems impossible. Most importantly, I tell them about Daniel Chen, now 5 years old, bright-eyed and full of life. When David brings him for checkups, I see Amanda in his smile, but I also see possibility. A life saved despite impossible odds. A future that exists because someone was willing to break the rules when the rules would have meant death. The $12 million lawsuit that almost destroyed my career. It became the case that taught me the most important lesson of my 40-year career. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but not doing it costs even more.